Bron Breakker just committed what might be the most vicious, most brutal, most absolutely savage assault in recent WWE history when he attacked Bronson Reed backstage on Monday Night Raw. And what I'm about to show you is going to make your blood boil because WWE is trying to sweep the real story under the rug. This wasn't just a typical backstage brawl between two superstars settling their differences. This was a premeditated attack, a calculated ambush that left Bronson Reed unconscious in a pool of his own blood. And the most infuriating part about this entire situation is that WWE officials stood there and watched it happen without doing a single thing to stop it. Bron Breakker, the Golden Boy, the Chosen One, the guy who WWE has been protecting and pushing to the moon since the moment he arrived on the main roster, just crossed a line that should have serious consequences, but instead of suspending him, instead of fining him, instead of holding him accountable in any way, WWE is celebrating this attack like it's some kind of heroic moment. And if you think this is just about two tough guys fighting backstage, if you think this is just business as usual in professional wrestling, then you need to understand something right now, because what happened on Raw represents everything that's wrong with how WWE operates, how they play favorites, how they create a system where certain wrestlers can do whatever they want without facing any consequences while others get punished for the smallest infractions. Let me take you through exactly what happened on Monday Night Raw, because the full story is even more disturbing than what they showed on television, and trust me, what they showed was already shocking enough to make fans jump out of their seats. The show was progressing normally, matches were happening, storylines were developing, and then suddenly the broadcast cut to backstage. Now, when WWE cuts to a backstage segment in the middle of the show, you expect to see an interview, maybe a brief confrontation, possibly some trash talk between rivals setting up a future match. What we got instead was something that looked like it belonged in a horror movie rather than a wrestling show. The camera focused on a hallway, and you could immediately see that something was wrong. There were production crew members running in different directions, officials shouting, and then the camera panned over to reveal Bronson Reed lying motionless on the concrete floor. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Here's where this goes from a simple attack to something much more sinister and calculated. Bronson Reed wasn't just knocked down, he was destroyed. His face was covered in blood. His body was twisted at an unnatural angle. And standing over him, breathing heavily, fist still clenched, covered in Reed's blood, was Bron Breakker. The look on Breakker's face wasn't remorse or shock at what he'd done. It was satisfaction. It was pride. He was smiling. This man had just put another human being in the hospital, had just ended someone's career for who knows how long, and he was standing there smiling like he'd just won the lottery. The camera caught everything, and what happened next is what should have every single wrestling fan absolutely furious right now. WWE officials finally showed up at the scene. Adam Pearce came running down the hallway with several referees and medical personnel. They surrounded Bronson Reed, checked his vital signs, called for more help, and started the process of getting him medical attention. And Bron Breakker? He just walked away, casually, like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just committed an assault that would get anyone else arrested in the real world. He walked past Adam Pearce, past the referees, past everyone, and nobody stopped him. Nobody grabbed him. Nobody even tried to hold him accountable in that moment. Adam Pearce, the same guy who fired Paul Heyman last week for supposedly abusing his power, the same guy who lectures everyone about professionalism and respecting WWE standards, just stood there and watched Bron Breakker walk away from a crime scene. Now let me give you the context of why this attack happened, because understanding the history between these two makes what Breakker did even more unforgivable. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed have been feuding for weeks now, ever since Reed interrupted one of Breakker's matches and cost him a victory. It started as a typical wrestling rivalry, the kind of thing we see all the time where two tough guys don't like each other and want to fight. They had a match a few weeks ago that was absolutely brutal, the kind of hard-hitting, physical contest that makes you wince just watching it. Both men gave everything they had, and when it was over, there was a level of mutual respect, or at least that's what it seemed like. They shook hands after the match. The crowd gave them a standing ovation. It looked like the feud was over and both men could move on to new opponents and new storylines. But apparently, Bron Breakker had other plans. Apparently, shaking Bronson Reed's hand wasn't genuine. It was a setup. It was a way to get Reed to lower his guard, to make him think the rivalry was finished so that Breakker could strike when Reed least expected it. And that's exactly what happened on Raw. According to reports from people who were backstage when this went down, Bronson Reed was walking to his locker room after a workout. He wasn't in his ring gear. He wasn't preparing for a match or a segment. He was just minding his own business, probably thinking about going home after the show, completely unaware that Bron Breakker was waiting for him around a corner with a steel chair in his hands. The attack was swift and merciless. Breakker came out of nowhere and smashed that steel chair across Reed's back before he even knew what was happening. Reed went down immediately, and that's when Breakker really went to work. He hit him with that chair again and again and again. Witnesses say they heard at least 10 chair shots, maybe more, each one echoing through the backstage area like a gunshot. But Breakker didn't stop there. After destroying Reed with the chair, he started using his fists. He mounted Reed and just started raining down punches on his face, his head, his body, anywhere he could connect. And this went on for what people estimate was at least 2 full minutes before anyone even tried to intervene. 2 minutes might not sound like a long time, but imagine being punched repeatedly in the face for 2 straight minutes. Imagine having a steel chair smashed across your body 10 or more times and then being beaten unconscious while you're unable to defend yourself. That's not wrestling. That's not even a fight. That's attempted murder. That's assault with a deadly weapon. That's the kind of thing that should result in immediate termination from the company and possibly criminal charges. But this is WWE, and this is Bron Breakker we're talking about, so the rules apparently don't apply. Now here's what makes this situation even more infuriating, even more completely unacceptable. This isn't the first time Bron Breakker has crossed the line. This isn't even the first time this month that he's done something that should have resulted in serious consequences. 2 weeks ago, he attacked a referee during a match because he disagreed with a call. He put his hands on an official, which in any legitimate sport would result in an immediate suspension and a massive fine. What happened to Breakker? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. WWE didn't suspend him. They didn't fine him. They didn't even make him apologize. Instead, they used it as part of his character development, framing him as this intense, unstoppable force who doesn't play by the rules. 3 weeks before that, he injured another wrestler during a match because he was working too stiff, hitting too hard, not protecting his opponent the way professional wrestlers are supposed to do. The wrestler had to miss several weeks of action because of the injuries Breakker caused. Again, what consequences did Breakker face? None. Zero. WWE didn't discipline him in any way. They just moved on like it never happened, like injuring your colleagues is just an acceptable part of doing business. And now we have this attack on Bronson Reed, which is by far the most serious, most violent, most inexcusable incident yet, and once again, it looks like Bron Breakker is going to face absolutely no consequences for his actions. In fact, if the rumors coming out of WWE are true, and I have this from multiple sources who work backstage and have no reason to lie about this, WWE is actually planning to reward Breakker for this attack. They're planning to push him even harder, give him even more prominent positions on the show, possibly even put him in a championship match at the next pay-per-view event. Let that sink in for a moment. A wrestler commits a brutal assault that puts another wrestler in the hospital, and instead of being punished, he's being rewarded with a title opportunity. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say WWE plays favorites. This is the double standard that makes being a wrestling fan so frustrating sometimes. If any other wrestler on the roster had done what Bron Breakker did, they would be suspended immediately. They might even be fired. We've seen it happen before. We've seen wrestlers get released from their contracts for far less serious incidents than what Breakker did on Raw. But because Breakker is the golden boy, because he comes from the legendary Steiner family, because WWE has invested so much time and money into building him as their next big star, he gets to operate under a completely different set of rules than everyone else. Think about the message this sends to the rest of the locker room. If you're a wrestler watching this happen, watching Bron Breakker get away with assault after assault, injury after injury, with no consequences whatsoever, what are you supposed to think? You're supposed to believe that WWE cares about wrestlers' safety? You're supposed to trust that the company will protect you if someone crosses the line? You're supposed to have faith that there's any semblance of fairness or justice in how things operate? Of course not. What this teaches everyone is that if you're one of the chosen ones, if you're one of the wrestlers that management has decided to push to the top, then you can do whatever you want. You can injure people. You can assault referees. You can put your colleagues in the hospital. And nothing will happen to you. But if you're not one of the chosen ones, if you're just a regular wrestler trying to make a living and support your family, then you better watch your step because one mistake could cost you everything. Let's talk about Bronson Reed for a minute because he's the victim in all of this and his story is being completely overshadowed by WWE's obsession with protecting Bron Breakker. Bronson Reed is one of the hardest working wrestlers on the entire roster. He came up through NXT, paid his dues, worked his way up from the bottom, and eventually made it to the main roster where he's been consistently delivering great performances. He's not the biggest star. He's not the most famous wrestler in WWE, but he's reliable, he's talented, and he shows up every single night ready to work his ass off to entertain the fans. He doesn't complain. He doesn't cause problems. He doesn't politic backstage or try to manipulate his way into better positions. He just does his job and does it well. And this is how WWE allows him to be treated? This is the protection they offer to a loyal employee who has given everything to this company? They allow him to be ambushed backstage, beaten unconscious with a steel chair and fists, sent to the hospital with God knows what kind of injuries, and the person who did it faces no consequences? That's disgraceful. That's unacceptable. That's the kind of thing that should make every single person who works for WWE question whether they're safe in their workplace, whether the company actually values them as human beings or just sees them as disposable assets to be used up and thrown away when they're no longer useful. According to the latest reports, and I'm getting this information from multiple sources who are close to the situation, Bronson Reed suffered a concussion from the attack, possible broken ribs from the chair shots, severe facial lacerations that required stitches, and various other bumps and bruises all over his body. He's going to be out of action for at least a month, possibly longer depending on how severe the concussion is and how long it takes for his other injuries to heal. That's a month of his career gone. A month where he's not earning money from live events and merchandise sales. A month where he's sitting at home recovering from injuries that never should have happened in the first place. And Bron Breakker? He'll be on Raw next week, probably getting a huge push, probably being positioned as some kind of badass who doesn't take crap from anyone, while Bronson Reed sits at home trying to heal from wounds that Breakker inflicted on him without any justification or consequence. This is what makes me so angry about this situation, and this is what should make you angry too if you care about wrestling, if you care about these performers, if you care about basic human decency and fairness. Bron Breakker didn't attack Bronson Reed during a match. He didn't get too aggressive in the heat of competition and accidentally hurt someone. This was a premeditated assault. This was planned. He waited for Reed backstage, ambushed him when he was vulnerable and unprepared, and then beat him unconscious with a weapon. In what world is that acceptable? In what universe does that not deserve serious punishment? WWE loves to talk about how they're a family, how they take care of their people, how they have standards and values and expect everyone to conduct themselves professionally. But when one of their chosen stars decides to commit an act of violence that would get anyone else fired or arrested, suddenly all those standards disappear. Suddenly all the talk about family and taking care of each other means nothing. The only thing that matters is protecting their investment in Bron Breakker, protecting the narrative they've created around him as this unstoppable force, this next-generation superstar who's going to carry the company into the future. And look, I'm not saying Bron Breakker isn't talented. He obviously has ability. He's athletic, he's strong, he has a good look, and he comes from legendary wrestling lineage as the son of Rick Steiner and the nephew of Scott Steiner. But talent doesn't give you the right to hurt people. Being the son and nephew of famous wrestlers doesn't mean you get to play by different rules than everyone else. And having potential as a future star doesn't excuse assaulting your colleagues and sending them to the hospital. There have been plenty of talented wrestlers throughout history who washed out of the business because they couldn't control themselves, because they let their egos get too big, because they started believing they were above the rules. And WWE, by refusing to discipline Bron Breakker for his actions, is setting him up to become one of those cautionary tales. What happens the next time Breakker decides someone disrespected him? What happens when he has another bad day and decides to take out his frustrations on whoever happens to be nearby? Is WWE going to wait until he seriously injures someone, until he ends someone's career permanently, until someone gets hurt so badly that there are lawsuits and criminal investigations? Or are they going to wake up now and realize that allowing this behavior to continue is dangerous, irresponsible, and completely unacceptable? I want you to imagine for a second that this wasn't Bron Breakker who committed this attack. Imagine it was someone else, someone who isn't being groomed as the next big star, someone who doesn't have family connections and built-in protection from management. Imagine it was a mid-card wrestler who ambushed someone backstage with a steel chair and beat them unconscious. That wrestler would be suspended immediately, possibly fired, and WWE would release a statement condemning the attack and promising it would never happen again. But because it's Bron Breakker, because he's the golden boy, all of that goes out the window. The rules don't apply to him, and that's absolutely infuriating. This double standard has existed in WWE for as long as the company has been around, and it's one of the most frustrating aspects of being a fan. We've seen it play out over and over again throughout the years. Certain wrestlers get pushed no matter what they do, no matter how many people they hurt, no matter how many mistakes they make, because management has decided they're going to be stars and nothing is going to change that plan. Meanwhile, other wrestlers who work just as hard, who are just as talented, who do everything right and never cause any problems, get held back or ignored or released because they don't fit whatever arbitrary criteria management has decided is important at any given moment. And the worst part about this situation with Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed is that it didn't have to happen this way. WWE could have told this story without anyone actually getting hurt. They could have filmed a worked attack, a scripted segment where it looks violent and brutal but everyone involved is safe and protected and knows exactly what's going to happen. That's how professional wrestling is supposed to work. You create the illusion of violence without actually hurting anyone. But according to multiple reports from people who were there, what happened on Raw wasn't a worked segment. This was a legitimate attack that went way too far, and Bronson Reed's injuries are very real. Some people are going to say I'm overreacting, that this is just wrestling and these things happen sometimes, that Reed knew what he was signing up for when he became a professional wrestler. And to those people, I say you're missing the point entirely. Yes, wrestling is a physical business. Yes, people get hurt sometimes despite everyone's best efforts to stay safe. But there's a huge difference between accidental injuries that happen during the normal course of a match and a deliberate attack where someone uses weapons and inflicts far more damage than necessary to tell a story. What Bron Breakker did wasn't an accident. It wasn't a case of something going wrong during a scripted segment. This was excessive, unnecessary violence that had no place in a professional wrestling environment. Let me ask you something, and I really want you to think about this before you answer in the comments. If you were Bronson Reed's family member, if you were his wife or his child or his parent, and you saw footage of him being ambushed backstage and beaten unconscious with a steel chair, how would you feel? Would you think this was just part of the business and no big deal? Or would you be absolutely terrified and furious that the company your loved one works for allowed this to happen and then did nothing to punish the person responsible? Would you feel safe knowing your family member has to go back to work in an environment where attacks like this can happen without any consequences? I think we all know the answer to that question, and it should make you understand why this situation is so serious and why WWE's failure to take action is so unacceptable. The sad reality is that WWE probably won't do anything to discipline Bron Breakker for this attack. They'll brush it under the rug, they'll spin it as part of the storyline, and they'll continue pushing him exactly as they planned before any of this happened. Bronson Reed will eventually come back from his injuries, and he'll probably be expected to just move on and pretend like everything is fine, like he wasn't assaulted and hospitalized by a colleague who faced zero consequences for his actions. And the cycle will continue. Bron Breakker will keep getting pushed, keep getting opportunities, and keep being protected by management no matter what he does. Meanwhile, wrestlers like Bronson Reed, the hard-working guys who do everything right and never cause problems, will continue to be treated as expendable. This is why fans get frustrated with WWE. This is why people complain about the product and the way the company operates. It's not just about the quality of the matches or the storylines. It's about the fundamental unfairness of a system that protects certain people no matter what they do while holding everyone else to impossible standards. It's about watching talented wrestlers get overlooked and disrespected while less deserving wrestlers get pushed because of who they're related to or who they're friends with backstage. It's about seeing someone get seriously hurt and knowing that nothing will be done about it because the person responsible is too valuable to the company's plans. I want to hear from you in the comments right now. Do you think WWE should suspend or fire Bron Breakker for what he did to Bronson Reed? Do you think this was a worked attack that went too far or a legitimate assault? How would you feel if you were Bronson Reed and you had to come back to work knowing your attacker faced no consequences? And do you think WWE's pattern of protecting certain wrestlers while punishing others is damaging to the company and the business as a whole? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and make sure you share this video with every wrestling fan you know because this conversation needs to happen. WWE needs to know that fans are paying attention, that we're not okay with this kind of behavior being tolerated, and that wrestlers like Bronson Reed deserve better treatment and protection than what they're currently getting. Before I wrap this up, I want to say one more thing directly to WWE management, to Adam Pearce, to Triple H, to everyone who makes decisions about how the company operates. You have an opportunity right now to do the right thing. You have a chance to show that you actually care about wrestlers' safety, that your talk about standards and professionalism isn't just empty words, that the rules apply to everyone equally regardless of their position on the card or their family connections. Suspend Bron Breakker. Fine him. Make him apologize publicly to Bronson Reed and to everyone who witnessed that attack. Show the locker room that behavior like this won't be tolerated no matter who you are. Because if you don't, if you let this slide like you've let everything else slide, then you're sending a very clear message that nothing matters except protecting your chosen stars, and that's a message that will come back to haunt you eventually. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you agree with what I said, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more wrestling content that actually tells the truth instead of just repeating whatever WWE wants you to believe. Share this video everywhere because the only way things change is if enough people speak up and demand better. Bronson Reed deserves justice. The wrestlers who work for WWE deserve a safe working environment. And fans deserve a company that actually lives up to the values it claims to represent. I'll see you in the next video.